plagues, right? It's called Badlul Ma'un fi Fadl al-Ta'un, right? It's not that big of a book, right? But he wrote a book about plagues where he deals with all of these different issues. Ibn Hajar mentions a view in there. He says some scholars, they say that how this hadith refers to some plagues that we don't know how they come about. But if there's a plague that we see the natural cause behind it, we know exactly where it came from, then that's not from the jinn. Ibn Hajar himself, he believes that all plagues, they come from the jinn, and sometimes certain natural elements may be involved where you see the source of the plague. But all of them, they're from the jinn in one way or another. Now, if we say that all plagues are from the jinn, if we say coronavirus is from the jinn, do we know exactly how? No, because the jinn are from the world of the unseen. Right? So perhaps Allah Azza wa Jalla, knows best. Those are just what the scholars have said about this particular issue. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, there's also a hadith where he tells us that anytime fahisha, what does fahisha mean? You guys have heard the word fahisha before. What does that refer to? What does fahisha mean? Zina, right? Any type of lewdness. Right? So lewdness, zina, committing fornication, adultery, all of these types of things. There's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, لَمْ تَظْهَرِ الْفَاحِشَةُ فِي قَوْمٍ قَطْ حَتَّى يُعْلِنُوا بِهَا إِلَّا فَشَا فِيهِمُ الطَّاعُونُ وَالْأَوْجَاعُ الَّتِي لَمْ تَكُنْ مَضَتْ فِي أَسْلَافِهِمُ الَّذِينَ مَضَوْا. The Prophet ﷺ tells us in a hadith in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. He says that any time fahisha spread among a people, and they're open with this fahisha. They announce this fahisha. They don't try to hide it. They embrace this fahisha. The Prophet ﷺ tells us any society that has this, the Prophet says that ta'un, right, plagues will manifest themselves within this community. And diseases will spread among these communities that the people before never heard about. The people before never experienced. If you look at HIV, you look at all of these sexually transmitted infections and diseases, the human race has never known about a lot of these diseases from before. But when fahisha has spread, when zina is spread, even among children, when it's in the TV shows, when it's everywhere, you're going to expect more and more of these things to appear. So if you look at it, this is a sign of the Prophet ﷺ, of his truthfulness. That when you see these things appearing in our society more and more, then you're going to see these things, you're going to see diseases spread. Like perhaps coronavirus is one of those diseases that the Prophet ﷺ is telling us about. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Now what is the wisdom behind Allah Azza wa Jalla decreeing that there are plagues? Because nothing happens except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. So why would Allah Azza wa Jalla, why would He decree that there be a plague among humans? So that you may turn back to Him, right? There's a few hadiths where the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, why, or the reason why Allah Azza wa Jalla decrees that there be plagues among mankind. There's a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, الطاعون رجس أو عذاب أرسل على بني إسرائيل أو على من كان قبلكم. He says that how the plague is a punishment from Allah Azza wa Jalla that came upon Bani Israel, and it came among people before you. فَإِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ بِهِ بِأَرْضٍ فَلَا تَقْدَمُوا عَلَيْهِ. So when you hear about the plague in any place, if you hear about a ta'un in any place, and we said that perhaps coronavirus can, there's many scholars who say that it does take the ruling of the ta'un, even though it may not be the actual ta'un that we may know it as, in terms of being a plague. The Prophet ﷺ, he says that anytime you hear about it in any place, then do not go to that place. And then he says, وَإِذَا وَقَعَ بِأَرْضٍ وَأَنْتُمْ بِهَا فَلَا تَخْرُجُوا فِرَارًا مِنْهُ. And anytime you are in a place and the plague appears in that place, then do not leave that place trying to run away from it. Why? Because if somebody runs away from it, what's going to happen? Perhaps they are infected with it. Perhaps they're carrying the virus, and when they run away from it, then they spread it to other places as well. Right? So, the prophetic guidance is to keep the virus, is to keep the plague in one place and not to spread it all over the place. Right? Now, there's also another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ tells us that how it's a punishment. He says, إِنَّهُ عَذَابٌ يَبْعَثُهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَنْ يَشَاءُ. The Prophet ﷺ also tells us it's a punishment that Allah sends upon whoever He wants. Viruses, plagues, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends it upon whoever He wills. And then He says, وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ جَعْلَهُ رَحْمَةً لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And indeed Allah has made it as a mercy for the believers. So if you think about how interesting that is, you could have one thing that does the same thing to, let's say, two people. For one person, it's an adhab of Allah Azza wa Jal. For that person, they have same symptoms, same suffering. Whatever is going on with them is the same. But for one person, it's an adhab of Allah Azza wa Jal, and for the other person, it's a rahmah. How is that? The Prophet ﷺ says it's a rahmah for the believers. Right? It's a rahmah for the believers. So just by you being a mu'min, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what ways could this be a rahmah? What do you guys think? How could it be a rahmah for a believer? Anyone? Good, right? By having this calamity, by having this disease, this ta'un, you're going to be patient. So you're going to be rewarded because of that patience. Allah Azza wa Jalla has given you an opportunity to be patient. What else? Okay, excellent. We're going to get to that, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, لَيْسَ مِنْ أَحَدٍ يَقَعُ الطَّاعُونُ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي بَلَدِهِ صَابِرًا مُحْتَسِبًا يَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ لَا يُصِيبُهُ إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَهُ إِلَّا كَانَ لَهُ مِثْلُ أَجْرِ شَهِيدٍ. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, he continues the same hadith. He says, any believer that stays in his land, he hears that the plague or the ta'un or the coronavirus has spread in his land, which right now we're in that situation. They stay in Queens, right? They stay in Queens or they stay in whatever city they're in. And they are patient, they have sabr, right? They're seeking the reward from Allah Azza wa Jal. And they believe that nothing will afflict them except what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written down for them. If they have that tawakkul in the qadr, this is a time where a lot of people, they question the qadr. Why did Allah decree this? But no, they stay in the place where they're at. And they have sabr and they hold it down. And they keep their firm faith in Allah Azza wa Jal. If they die, they will get the reward of a shaheed. But as for somebody who doesn't believe in Allah Azza wa Jal, as for somebody who's blaming Allah, why me? Why this? Why my family? Why now? Why my city? Then of course that person is not going to get that reward. And it's going to be an adhab, a punishment for that person before the adhab of the akhirah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. There's also another narration in the Musnad of Ahmad. The Prophet ﷺ said, "At-ta'un," that the ta'un is shahadatun li ummati. It's you get the rank of being a martyr in the path of Allah Azza wa Jal, and that's for this ummah. And he says, "Wa rahma," and it's also a rahmah, wa rijsun ala al-kafir, and it's a punishment for the person who disbelieves in Allah Azza wa Jal. So you can have one thing, but it has those two opposite effects. Also a hadith in Bukhari Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "At-ta'un shahadatun li kulli Muslim." That the ta'un, diseases like this, are a source of getting the reward of being a martyr in the path of Allah Azza wa Jal for every single Muslim. Right? So you get that same reward of a shaheed. There's also hadith in Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mabtunu shaheed wal-mat'unu shaheed." He says in this hadith that someone who dies of a stomach ailment, if you have, for example, stomach cancer or some sort of stomach issue and you die because of that, you're a shaheed. And the Prophet also says whoever dies in a plague is a shaheed as well. Now, of course, they get the reward in the akhirah. They're not actually, treated the same way in terms of ahkam, but in terms of ruling, in terms of the reward. Now, we got to realize that how none of these diseases or plagues can spread except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. You can have somebody who takes all of the precautions. Whatever Brother Sam mentioned, they do all of that. They don't touch their face. They're wearing the masks. They're washing their hands every 30 seconds, and they still get it. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed that you get it, no matter what you do, you're going to get it as a test. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, He's written it down 50,000 years before the creation of the universe, that you're not going to get it, you could be exposed to 1,000,001 people that have coronavirus or any plague, and you're not going to get it. Through whatever reason that Allah Azza wa Jalla decrees. So nothing can happen except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. What does that tell you that you should do? What should you do in having that knowledge now? Take precautions, right? But what else? When you realize everything is in the hands of Allah Azza wa Jalla, what do? You have tawakkul, you have trust in Allah Azza wa Jalla. Now, Brother Samuel, he was mentioning in his session, he was saying that tire camel. There's a hadith where a man came to Allah's Messenger. He said, "Oh Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, should I, back then, if you had a camel, they would run away very quickly. So he said, "Oh Allah's Messenger, should I tie my camel and have tawakkul, or should I leave my camel, let it roam around and have tawakkul?" In a modern example, that's saying, "Oh Messenger of Allah, should I leave my car windows down and the doors open in the middle of the night in a bad neighborhood, or should I lock the cars and have tawakkul?" So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, tie your camel and then have tawakkul. Right? So you need to take the precautions, but at the same time have reliance in Allah Azza wa Jal. And know that if you die, if you're part of the 2% or 3% that passes away, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept you as a shaheed. And many scholars have said that they hope that a person who dies from the coronavirus, as a Muslim, having hope in Allah Azza wa Jal, that they have the reward of a shaheed. So if you think about it, as a believer, you're going to get a benefit out of every situation, no matter what. You're always winning. Right? Yeah, you're in a win-win situation no matter what. Alright, and we got to realize that there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ tells us that La adwa, there's no such thing as contagious diseases except by Allah Azza wa Jalla's qadr. And there's a hadith where, and this is in Sahih Muslim, he says, La yuridu al-mumridu ala al-musih. The Prophet ﷺ said, a person, back then, sometimes they would have diseased camels. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said that no one who has diseased camels should bring those camels to someone who has healthy camels. You shouldn't let them mix. Right? Those who are sick should stay where they're at, and those who are healthy should stay where they're at. So in other words, if you find out that you have this disease, you also have an Islamic obligation to quarantine yourself. It's not just about a medical advice now. The Prophet ﷺ said this, if it's about camels, then it's about us as well. But you don't want to be spreading all of those germs. So you have an Islamic responsibility with your relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal that you protect other people from your harm. All right. Now, in terms of ahkam, those are just some of the hadiths that have been narrated about the virtue of it, and just some general facts about it. Now, what are some ahkam? The scholars have mentioned that if you hear that there's an area, and there's some scholars who have put out fatwa and verdicts about coronavirus specifically. They said if you hear about an area, then don't travel to that area. Right? It's not permissible to travel to that area. So for example, if you hear about a city and they're on lockdown, for example, right? Or the authorities have advised that you don't, travel to that place, right? Then many scholars have said that it's not permissible to travel to those areas. Does it mean the whole country? No, right? But those specific cities, those specific towns where people are on lockdown and it's, like a high-risk area, the scholars have said that it's not permissible to travel to those areas. Now, what if, the Prophet ﷺ, he told us that anytime there's a ta'un in a place, don't go to that place. So that's their evidence for that. But what about leaving? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, if you're in a place, then don't leave from that place. Right? Don't run away from it. Does that mean that if I'm in a place and I'm healthy, that means I can't travel for business, for example? Sometimes, as Brother Sam mentioned, that some people, they may have the virus, but they're showing no symptoms, but they can still carry it. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, don't leave that place. So many scholars, they've said that it's impermissible for you to travel from a place that's infected with this until you get tested. They've mentioned that there's an exception if you get tested and they have kind of cleared you. I'm pretty sure you guys heard on the news that they, on the cruise ships, they kept those people for like 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, they were let go. So something like that, for it to be permissible for you to travel from the area that's infected, you must get tested before you can travel and get out of that place. Right? So, this is just what the scholars have mentioned in terms of travel. All right? Now, and as I mentioned, whatever the couple of rulings that I've just mentioned, they only apply to the immediate areas. So if you're living in a big country like ours and your area has nothing to do with the coronavirus, you can travel, no problem. You can leave, you can move about freely, no problem with that. Now, in terms of the masjids, in terms of how we should deal with this type of situation in the masjids, there's some scholars, for example, AMJA, the American Muslim Jurists Association, they put out a statement where they've given advice and they've mentioned certain guidelines for the masjids. I'm just going to read that to you guys right now. But you can find this on their website, you can find this online, and to be honest, it's very good advice. So they've said, it is not permissible for the masjids and Islamic centers to suspend the congregational prayers and Jum'ah because of the spread of the virus in the United States, unless the local public health authorities in a particular city advises the suspension of services at the house of worship and avoidance of large public gatherings. So until it gets to that point, we're still going to have the Jama'ah, we're still going to have the Jum'ah. There's no reason for you to say, oh, I'm not going to make Jum'ah anymore as a man. Right? You got to go out and make Jum'ah, right? If you're going to go out to work, then why not go to Jumu'ah, right? So, and of course, take the necessary precautions. Wash your hands, right? And perhaps maybe if you feel more safe having a mask, even though Dr. Sam mentioned that perhaps that's not really going to help you, just take whatever precautions you can. All right. They've also said in the event of that development, the masjid managements should comply with such instructions. And of course, I think that everywhere is going to comply with that. They've also said this would be a sufficient excuse to pray Jumu'ah at home as a dhuhr until the restriction is removed. So this one gets to an extreme case. They've also said it is permissible for the masjid managements to demand those with flu symptoms to wear masks during the congregational prayers. Right? So if somebody asks you, if any authority asks you, you should comply with that, because it's not just about you, but it's about other people as well. You don't want to spread that virus. And they said it is also permissible to assign a room for them or a designated area in the prayer hall, and to advise them to avoid handshaking with other worshippers and follow the proper precautions to prevent the transmission of the disease. Right? Now, to be honest, like the past couple of days, I had a friend, and this friend, he has a baby. And he was strolling his baby. We were at a particular event, and his baby, he didn't want his baby to get in too many. I guess he didn't want his baby to have any contact with people. I mean, he didn't do anything to cover his baby up. But there was one brother that came around at his stroller and started touching his child. You got to understand, in a situation like this, you have to have some common sense. Even though they say kids, some people just want to feel safe. If you see that someone who has a child is moving the child away from you, don't get offended, right? I think, don't get offended. You got to understand the situation that we're in. If somebody, for example, they have pre-existing health problems and they don't want to shake your hand, don't get offended by that. You got to realize we're not in a regular situation here, right? This thing is spreading. It's literally around the corner. Only Allah Azza wa Jalla knows how many people have been, afflicted with this. And you got to realize the numbers that you have, those are only confirmed cases. That's not, those numbers don't reflect the total amount of people that have this virus in reality. It's definitely a lot much more. Okay, so don't get offended by that, and you should be considerate of other people. They then said that the masjid management should follow the updates that are periodically issued by the public health agencies like CDC, and comply with their instructions. They've also said, as for Jumu'ah, it is not permissible for adult men who are otherwise required to attend it to miss it, except in the case of justifiable, not conjectural fear. What matters in this regard is the instructions of the public health authorities. If they advise the avoidance of all public gatherings, then the epidemic has reached a level making that fear justifiable. So in that situation, if they tell you avoid all public gatherings, it's too dangerous, then you can stay home and pray dhuhr instead of Jumu'ah. Only in that situation. All right? They've also said, as for the high-risk groups, such as old people and those with chronic disease, they should follow the advice of their primary healthcare providers. They are most entitled to concessions. So if you have a specific situation, then by all means, if your doctor says to stay home or to stay away from work and public gatherings like Jumu'ah, then you should comply to protect your health. Now, when it comes to coming to masjids, what advice do they give? They said that people with symptoms of the disease, which are like those of flu, should avoid coming to the masjids if they suspect that they may be infected until they check with their healthcare providers and ensure that they're not. This is because the harm of spreading this virus is much greater than that of bothering the people with the odor of garlic. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever eats this plant, this garlic, should not come near our masjid and should not bother us with the odor of garlic. And if that's the case for garlic, something that's not a disease, what about the coronavirus? Right? So, alhamdulillah, I don't think anywhere in any masjid community that I've heard about is in this situation, right? Or has been advised to kind of go on lockdown like this. But if it gets to that level, then you got to understand that this is just to protect the people, right? This is just to protect the people and to prevent the further spread of the virus. All right, so these are just some general, Islamic guidelines that the scholars have given us. Now, I think we're going to open up the floor for some Q&A, inshallah. So whatever questions you guys have, we're going to have Dr. Sam come up as well. And we'll continue that way, inshallah.
All right, so does anyone have any
Okay,
questions?
any questions? There is a question from Facebook. What's the difference between this and pneumonia?
So, I mean, pneumonia is a manifestation of a virus or a bacteria, right? So, pneumonia means it's gotten into the lungs, it's causing a lung infection. When you have a cough and a sneeze and a cold, it's in the upper respiratory tract. So, bacteria can cause pneumonia, different viruses can cause pneumonias as well, including COVID, right? COVID can cause a pneumonia. That means it's gone into the lungs, and that's where the real danger happens, and that's where the people that we hear are dying from that. They're not dying from the sneeze and the cough, they're dying from the pneumonia.
Thank you. Another question is, do you recommend us to bring our own prayer mat so when we prostrate, we don't breathe the carpet?
I mean, it's a hard question. We don't know how long the COVID particles, the viral particles are on the carpet. So if someone goes in sujood and sneezes and doesn't cover their mouth, obviously they're in sujood, we don't know how long it's going to stay on the mat. So if you want to be extra safe, you can bring your own mat and pray. Otherwise, if you come to the masjid, just be aware that, there may be a risk there in that sense. Again, wash your hands, stuff like that, be safe. But if you want to be extra cautious, especially if you're elderly, if you're immunocompromised, you want to come to pray in the masjid, then you can bring your own mat. Allahu alam, how much that will help. We'll learn more as we learn more about the virus and how long it survives and things like that. We'll have better answers, inshallah.
Next question is, which one is better, hand soap or hand sanitizer?
So definitely hand soap. Hand sanitizer is good. You're on the go. You don't have access to water. Then you can use hand sanitizer. And again, CDC is recommending the alcohol-based hand sanitizers, 65 to 90% or whatever, right? The high alcohol content ones that'll kill coronavirus, kill any coronavirus, including COVID. But soap is definitely better. Soap and water, it'll get rid of these viruses, get rid of all of this stuff, and also get rid of any dirt you have on your hands where they may be surviving. And you can really scrub under your nails, make sure it's all out. So if you have the choice, definitely soap and water.
Okay, I have a question. So I have a question. Now that we're mentioning this, is there any particular type of soap that you advise or is advised to buy and to keep with you?
I mean, any antibacterial soap should suffice, inshallah. And the CDC does have a guide of what cleaning products are good. We have the link there, inshallah. When we're done, we'll put the links back up. But it has a link of a whole bunch of products that they say will be effective, both for cleaning, for your hands, for everything. So, inshallah, refer to that link. It's cdc.gov. They're really updating it very frequently, as is places like the New York Times, but definitely cdc.gov. That should be a go-to place. And inshallah, again, when we put the links up there, you can see a list of cleaning products that should be effective. Bidnillah.
Okay, so it has to be antibacterial soap, not regular soap, right?
So, get antibacterial soap. That means it'll probably be more effective.
Like
Dettol,
again, I don't know Dettol, with this kind of stuff.
Oh, like say that again, sorry?
Like Dettol, that's kind of, the soap that has, that mentioned antibacterial disinfectant.
That'd probably be safer. That means it's probably been tested more and stuff. Again, it's not specifically tested against, COVID, right? But we know that COVID breaks down with soap. So if you want to be safe, that would probably be the safest thing to get. But again, once you put that link up, definitely refer to that link because there's so many different products there. So you can just make sure that whatever you're buying is on there just for peace of mind.
Okay, there is another question. This is for Sh.Zakareeya. What do you think about an opinion that say that this is a punishment for certain people? Specifically because of the oppression.
Yeah. So can this be a punishment for certain people? The Prophet ﷺ, right? He very clearly mentions it that especially looking at the view of the scholars who would consider coronavirus as a ta'un, the Prophet ﷺ clearly tells it it's an adhab. It's an adhab. It's a test. It's an adhab and it's a rahmah for some people. So no doubt about it. It's going to be an adhab for some people for whatever reason. Whatever people have done, it's an adhab for some people. That's no doubt about that. And it's also a rahmah, and it's also a means of shahada for some people as well, right? They get that reward. So there's no doubt about that, right? Now, specifically, what have people done to lead to that? Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Perhaps other people may have different opinions about that. I don't think we can really pinpoint exactly. We're just looking at the outward things of this dunya, right? Allah Azza wa Jalla says, يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا, that they know what is only apparent from al-hayat al-dunya. You got to realize when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees something, to say exactly, this is definitely adhab, or this is definitely rahmah, that's from the intent of Allah Azza wa Jalla. That's from the ghaib. We can never be sure of that. So Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. But in general terms, the Prophet ﷺ does tell us it's an adhab for some people and it's a rahmah for some other people. Wallahu a'lam.
Question? Okay.
Like a plague or a disease is like a stab from the jinn, like there's a hadith like that. So like they did say the corona was not previously found of humans, but it was found in animals. So is it possible that the jinn probably gave it to the animals first?
Perhaps, Ibn Hajar, just to kind of explain more of his position. So he mentions in that same book that I mentioned to you guys, right? He wrote a whole book about the ta'un, about plagues and diseases like this. So his view, right? He kind of mentions some views of the scholars, and at the end of this section in his book, he mentions his view. He says that there's no contradiction between it being from the jinn and we finding some natural causes to this plague or whatever disease. Because he said that perhaps the asl or the reason, or let's say the actual origin of the disease has to do with the world of the jinn, but the way that it manifests itself in our world is through some natural means. You see what I'm saying? So he has kind of like a hybrid approach to it. That yes, all of them are from the jinn, but how it manifests itself in our world is through some natural means like animals or some other reason. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. I mean, we cannot, we can't say 100% yes, the jinn put it in the bat and the person had the bat soup and then this happened and then that, and that happened. Only Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. And we got to realize the jinn are from the world of the ghaib. So before you say, oh, that's impossible, how do you know it's impossible? Do you know what is possible in the world of the jinn to say that it's impossible? You don't. Right? So for somebody to say, that's a whole lot of baloney that it comes from the jinn. Only Allah Azza wa Jalla knows. But when the Prophet ﷺ tells us that the ta'un is literally a poke or a stab or a piercing from the jinn, we got to realize, and the Prophet ﷺ said it's from your enemies from the jinn. So they definitely have a role to play. Did they play a role in the coronavirus? Only Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Right? Wallahu a'lam. Allahu A'lam. How they do it, we don't know. Allah knows best.
Okay, there is another question. We still have time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? Or
Yeah.
what's your time? Okay, actually somebody already asked this, but okay, let me skip it for now. How did the companions deal with this type of situation?
Okay. So that's a very good question. Did the Sahaba ever experience a plague? The answer is yes. While Umar radiallahu anhu, while he was the Khalifa, they had a plague in Syria. Now this plague killed about, anywhere from 25,000 to 30,000 people, right? So a huge number of tabi'in died. Thousands of them died. Of Muslims, hundreds of Sahaba died. Among them Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu. Some scholars mentioned that Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu, he passed away as well. And many other of the Sahaba died. Umar radiallahu anhu, he was on his way to go to Syria because when he heard about the plague, he wanted to go to see what's going on. So on his way, before he entered into the affected place, Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu, who is one of the leaders, he came to Umar radiallahu anhu and he said, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen," he said that, are you going to enter into this place? And he's telling him about all of the different things that are happening within that place in Syria. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he was wondering, should he enter into that place? Should he go into that place or not? He didn't know about the hadith that we mentioned, right? So Umar radiallahu anhu got the counsel of some of the Sahaba. And some Sahaba told him, yes, go into the land and go see what's going on. You're the leader. You need to find out what's going on so you can help these people. And others of the Sahaba said, no, you shouldn't go into that place, right? We don't want you as the leader of the Muslims to go into that place. And perhaps if you go into that place and you go back to Medina, you're going to spread the plague to them as well. Right, so they have had some different opinions. Now Umar radiallahu anhu, he made a decision that we're going to go back to Medina. We're not going to go into that place. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah radiallahu anhu, he says to Umar, he said, أَفِرَارًا مِنْ قَدْرِ اللَّهِ. He said, are you trying to run away from Allah's qadr? Are you trying to run away from Allah's qadr? So Umar radiallahu anhu, he said that how, no, we're running from Allah's qadr to Allah's qadr. Right? Because you got to realize whether you go in and you get it, you know, get the plague, or you go back and you don't get the plague, it's all Allah Azza wa Jall's qadr. It's not as if one thing is the qadr and everything else is not. Everything is the qadr of Allah Azza wa Jalla. This is what he was trying to make Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu understand. Now somebody came and somebody told Umar radiallahu anhu that same hadith that we mentioned, right? That anytime you hear about a plague in a place, don't enter that place. And anytime you're in the same place that it has occurred in, then do not leave from that place. So Umar radiallahu anhu, as soon as he heard that hadith, he was out of there. Right? He went away because he's not going to enter into that place, and he didn't know about this hadith until the person told him. But it agreed with the decision that he made. Right? So, and like I said, it's unfortunate, many Sahaba passed away, and those who are better than us, they were affected with this. Right? So don't think that there's something wrong with your iman if you get a sickness. No, those who are better than you, Ayyub alayhi salam, look at the prophets. They went through much more difficulties than we go through. So the amount of difficulties, if anything, it's going to prove that you have a higher iman. You have greater iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So hopefully that answers that question. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. This is the last question. A lot of people say that wudu can protect us from coronavirus. I mean, wudu.
Oh, wudu.
So this is for both of you guys, you know, from the medical and from the deen. And also, you know, a lot of people shared like a hadith, a quote from Imam Tabarani. You know, it's supposed to be a hadith, but, you know, it says that near the hour, only my ummah will be protected because they perform wudu from all the sickness. So, have you heard that hadith?
Okay, I haven't heard of the hadith. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.
I mean, I guess from a medical standpoint, of course. I mean, wudu. So wudu has obviously, you know, very important religious component, but it also is a way to keep clean, right? Even when I do wudu, sometimes first I wash my hands with soap, right? Because I've been in the hospital, I've been at home, touching different things. So I wash my hands with soap first, right? So just as part of before I even do wudu. So already I'm cleaning my hands, right? We're doing it at least, you know, 2-3 times a day, maybe if you're really like not going to the bathroom or something, but probably even more times a day.
So the soap shouldn't be part of the wudu, right?
So no, just before it's like a pre-wudu. Yeah, it's more like a pre-wudu. Because you got soap water.
Can we include soap in the wudu?
No, not part of the wudu. Before I do my wudu, I just use soap normally before I even start, right? As part of my just getting clean. So just from part of that, it's a way of cleaning your hands as part of your normal daily practice. And just the fact of cleaning it, when you're doing wudu, you're washing, right? You're scrubbing your hands. So you're washing away bacteria, dirt, all that kind of stuff, viruses that are on there. And then you're washing your arm, right? You're washing your face. So you're cleaning your body. So from Allah Azza wa Jalla's wisdom that, you know, we're told to do this, right? Both from a spiritual standpoint, but also from a medical standpoint. So I think it is beneficial, right? We're keeping clean and keeping our hands and our face and everything clean.
And just to comment on that point, can we make wudu with soapy water? Right? This is important. Let's say somebody has some water and it's soapy because they want to protect themselves from coronavirus and they want to put soap, you know, with their, you know, on their face and their arms. Huh? Oh, maybe they want to put some rubbing alcohol in there as well, 60% or whatever the case is. Listen, the only thing we're allowed to make wudu with is water. As long as it remains as water, you can use it. If you mix it with something to the point where it doesn't just become water, it becomes soapy water, or alcohol water, or any other type of water, right? Then you can't use that, right? But if it's like a small amount of soap, for example, if you have a bucket of water and it's a small amount of soap, and that soap does not remove the water from being generally water, you don't consider it soapy water. It's just a little bit of soap. Then it's fine, you know. So you can use that. It's no problem. Wallahu a'lam.
1 minute. Any other questions from the sisters?
I think the sisters have been quiet, very quiet tonight.
Very quiet.
MashaAllah, that means they understand everything.
They understand everything.
Anyone else? Any other questions, comments?
Okay, hold on.
Not a sister, but alhamdulillah, question.
So would we be allowed to leave Queens or not? Like if we want to go on a trip or?
So in that particular situation, there's a few, you know,
I thought you were gonna ask about the fish.
who have mentioned that if you're in Queens, if you're in the place and it's, all right, but you see, it's a different story. Like if you're in, like to be honest, I don't think Queens is gonna get really hit hard unless you're gonna find like the tri-state area is also gonna get, you know, it's gonna be the very similar situation. So like moving throughout the same infected area is fine, but leaving this area to a place that's not infected or going to a place where they don't have the same issue, in that situation, there's many scholars who say it would not be permissible to do that until you get tested and until you can be sure that you're not going to be spreading anything to people in a healthy area. Because you don't want to be the cause. I mean, imagine there's you know, a nursing home that you're going to go visit or something like this, and you're going to leave your area and fly over there, and there's people that are at high risk. You know, there's many scholars who say that that would not be permissible. Wallahu a'lam. You know, depending on the situation, I'm sure that the authorities will definitely give some good guidelines to us if it gets to that point, and Allah knows best. Yeah, so the thing is, so that's, remember, those hadiths talk about the ta'un. So is coronavirus ta'un to begin with? Do you see why that hadith and why defining what ta'un is important? Because does that apply to coronavirus or does that apply to the flu? It would not apply to the flu. Because that's something that is normal. You know, flu season comes around, it's something normal for people to get sick. That's not ta'un in any way. It's not a waba, it's not something that's out of the norm. Coronavirus absolutely is out of the norm. Right? With the amount of, I mean, the fact that we don't have a vaccine for it, we don't have a cure for it, it's definitely out of the norm. So that's why some scholars would consider it ta'un, because of those specific qualities that it has as opposed to other viruses. Right? So it wouldn't apply to a regular cold, right?
So I have a two-part question. The first part is, what kind of things could the Muslims do to kind of deal with the hysteria regarding, from the spiritual standpoint, about what's going on? I think a lot of things that I see out there is that as Muslims, we're seeing things on TV and we're so reactionary and we don't kind of take in all the facts. So the first part of the question is like, what are the things that we could do from an Islamic standpoint to kind of deal with some of that anxiety and angst that we may have? And also the second part of the question, maybe Dr. Sam can answer this, is that what kind of facts or kind of things we could know about other like kind of diseases that are very, very common that cause more deaths, higher rates of mortality, that's around all the time, and we don't worry about it so much. For instance, like, you know, even people dying of malaria every year, and the common flu, things like that. So it was like a two-part question. How do we kind of like, you know, compare coronavirus to things that's been around for a long time, that's more detrimental and that is more deadly, and, you know, how do we relate to that? And the second part is, what from Islamic standpoint should we do to kind of like bring our level of anxiety down and not go into get mad and hysterical about this coronavirus?
Someone want to go first?
Hey, sure.
Yeah. No, I said, do you want to go first?
Okay, yeah. So in terms of looking at other diseases that may be causing more stuff, remember that graph I showed, right? It showed you that SARS, MERS, smallpox, which alhamdulillah we don't have anymore, right? But think about people back in the day who had smallpox. When you got that could have been, you know, that could have been the end, right? Very high likelihood. TB back in the day. Now we have antibiotics and stuff to help with TB, right? But back in the day, TB could have been a very, very high death sentence. And even now, we can't get too complacent, right? So when you go to a doctor, right, and you have a little cut, you have a little cold, they probably give you antibiotics, right? A lot of times. And this is what causing antibiotic resistance. So we're seeing even TB, we're seeing resistant forms of TB where people get it, and we're back in the dark ages again, where there's nothing to cure it anymore. Right? So there's these things that are really scary out there, and we see them in the hospital all the time, right? We see things like that, and even the flu. Like I told you, I knew a young person who died from the flu. We see older people who actually die from the cold, right? From getting the common cold, and they have bad lungs, and they get intubated, and, you know, things happen, and they end up passing away, right? So these common things, the media doesn't talk about them, right? They're not sensational. They don't get people in a hysteria. We know everyone gets the cold, everyone gets the flu. We get our flu shot. It's kind of boring, right? But when something like the novel coronavirus comes up, the media is all over it. And that's why it causes people to get into a hysteria and a panic and buying out all the stuff and everything, right? So we have to remember, right? We can't be complacent, right? We can't be like, it's nothing, the media is making it up, right? Let me not care about it, right? It's real, right? We saw the map, we saw the death rate, right, so far. So we know it's a real disease. right? But we also know the precautions to take and how to be safe. And then you combine the medical part with the tawakkul, and then inshallah both of those combined, we shouldn't be in a panic mode, we shouldn't be getting hysterical and waking up with anxiety every day and you can't function, right? That's not the way a Muslim should be. We have tawakkul, like Brother Zakareeya said, we tie our camel and then we live our life, right? And we follow those of, those, the experts, right? Like Surah Hujurat says, right? Follow, what's Surah Hujurat? To go to those with more, to go seek those of knowledge. Main Surah Hujurat.
Surah Al-Nahl. Ask those of dhikr, ask those of knowledge if you don't.
Yes.
If you don't know. Okay.
I'm glad you're sitting next to me.
Alhamdulillah.
But yeah, seek those with more knowledge, right? Seek your doctor, seek medical experts if you have any concerns, any questions.
Yeah, I would add to that have a close, kind of developing a close relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reading the Quran, really reading about the akhirah. Because you got to realize, whether it's the coronavirus or anything else, there's so much out there. There's so much to worry about. And I'm going to give you a story of a brother who's here right now. I'm not going to mention who he is. Perhaps some of us know who I'm talking about. But this brother, I remember this brother, he had like an autoimmune issue. I don't know exactly what it was, right? But this brother was in a hospital. And I remember when we visited this brother, he's sitting there just chilling. Somebody who has perhaps the same amount of like family members, obligations, whatever. Perhaps they may be freaking out. Oh my God, I could die from this. I don't know what's gonna happen to me. But this brother was cute. He was cool as a cucumber, as they say, right? He was just like literally just sitting there. And when we would talk to this brother, he would say things about Allah Azza wa Jalla, like I'm just being patient. And that's what you really need. And perhaps the brother was only able to do that because of the preparations that he was making. Sometimes when the calamity hits, there's no more preparation. There's no more like increasing your iman. That's why the Prophet ﷺ tells us that there's certain fitan and trials and signs of the day of judgment, that when they come, you can't improve your iman. There's no tawbah, for example, when the sun rises from the west. No more tawbah after that. No more getting better after that. Whatever iman you have, you're going to have to be basically riding on that iman through the calamity. That's it. So think about this right now. Before you get into certain fitan, develop that love for the akhirah, that hoping for the akhirah, and realizing that you're just a traveler in this world. The sooner you realize that, the easier it's going to be when you find out that you're going to be losing something from this world. You're meant to lose it anyway, right? Your true life is not here, right? So perhaps that's something that could really help a believer understand that, even if I have TB or I have coronavirus, whatever happens to me, I'm pleased with Allah Azza wa Jal. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever hopes to meet Allah Azza wa Jal, whoever loves to meet Allah, Allah loves to meet him. And whoever dislikes to meet Allah, they're holding on to this life so much that they hate to meet Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hate to meet them as well. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to be among those who love to meet Him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have sabr in whatever calamities we go through, including those of us who are afflicted with corona. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gave us tawfiq to take the necessary measures and to have tawakkul. Ameen. I think we're going to stop here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.